really the only issue that all Republicans in the House agree on is that Israel is a priority over the United States. They all agree.
Oh, absolutely. They all agree. They have to proclaim Israel. They have to proclaim their faith and loyalty in Israel and how they, Israel is our greatest ally. And it's a statement that has to be made over and over and over again.
So recently, Marjorie Taylor Greene was on Tucker Carlson's podcast talking about why she opposes the Israel first mentality. And this is a real breakthrough because there's only been a few outliers like Thomas Massie in the Republican Party that have ever made such statements as this. So I want to hear her talk about the Israeli influence in the government, AIPAC, and other things. So let's watch and let's react. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Since I've become a member of Congress since 2021, we have voted on 22 resolutions for Israel, 22 of them, all kinds of resolutions, denouncing anti-Semitism, supporting Israel. We voted on 22 of those. We never vote on resolutions proclaiming great things about America or defending certain Americans or defending Americans in general. But we have voted on 22 resolutions in the House defending Israel.
How many of you voted yes on?
I don't know my exact record. The last one I voted no on, and then the one before that I voted present because I just started getting sick of it.
Yeah, she's totally correct. This is almost like a religious sacrament, something that Republicans and Democrats, once they win office, are expected to just toe the line in regard to support for Israel. If you want to maintain the illusion that the left and right are so polarized and opposed to each other on every single thing, just take a look at the historical votes for Israeli aid. It's almost, the consensus that they always get what they want. And she's so true here. I'm so glad to hear her say this and kind of expose the fact that you're just expected to pass all these resolutions praising Israel, give them all the money they want for their genocide in Gaza and their war in Iran, etc. So, yeah, right on.
Well, that's kind of it. I mean, I've always noticed this, certainly in the last, I don't know how many years it's been, a while, where Republicans in the Congress are, always talking about Israel. I'm not against Israel. I've always liked Israel, so I haven't really noticed it. Okay, fine. Love Israel, love any country, whatever. But it feels like something has changed. Like why? And clearly it has for you. What is that thing?
Well, I think here's the situation. It's coming to a point where it's so obvious all the time in everyone's language, the social media posts they put out, the statements that they make. They have to proclaim Israel. They have to proclaim their faith and loyalty in Israel and how they, Israel is our greatest ally. And it's a statement that has to be made over and over and over again, to the point it's becoming like, wait a minute, what about our own country? What about our own people? And we have so many problems here in America. And we talk about this all the time. $37 trillion in debt. Just like you and I were speaking before, our kids' generations. My kids are 22, 25, and 27. And our children's generation, they can't afford rent. They can't afford to buy a house. They can't afford insurance. They can't buy a new car. They can't find a good paying job. They're living month to month, paycheck to paycheck, credit card bills stacked up. And they literally look to the future going, how am I ever going to realize the American dream?
Yeah, this is so true. The political establishment expects you to subordinate your own interest in your own community compared to Israel. And a lot of Americans don't generally care about what really happens in the Middle East. It's all because of the military-industrial complex, the war regime, the defense contractors, and the Israel lobby that the U.S. gets drawn into this stuff. I mean, you're expected to just toe this line when you get to D.C. And, I think Americans are really waking up to it in a way that I've never seen throughout my entire life at all, where it was only the dissidents and really anti-war activists that were really talking about this in a major way. But now you have people on the right and the left. It used to be many people on the left talking about this, and there are some of those. There's Ilhan Omar. There was Jim Traficant and some others that, are very opposed to this. The Squad, at least to some extent, was, even though, many of them seem to have capitulated to some extent. But now you have people on the right doing it. that see this for what it is, and that's just an extension of U.S. empire building. And Pat Buchanan laid the seeds for that, I believe, because he said you can't have a limited government with unlimited empire, and there's no better semblance of our interest in unlimited empire than the entangling alliance with Israel.
And it seems hopeless for them. But then in Congress, everyone is chasing and pursuing and proclaiming their loyalty to a foreign country. And my goodness, I have nothing against Israel. I wish them well. I wish the people of Israel well. I wish Jewish people well. But I also wish every country well. And I want good things for everyone.
So why do you hate Israel so much?
Right?
Yeah.
But, here's what it is. I compare it to, it's like white guilt. We've dealt with white guilt for so many years, and it's...
Has it worked? Has it improved anyone's life?
No. No. And this is a similar thing, when in reality, everyone's lives are going to improve here in our country if we just focus on our own country.
Yeah, that's so right. And I do think it's a mistake to conflate the people of Israel wrapped up in this whole thing, and might actually be dissidents themselves. There are many Israelis like that. And the acts of their government, the criminal acts of their government, because I know that's the situation for me. I don't exactly like my government. I would not be wanting to be conflated with my government. I try to even never say we when referring to the government that I live under, even though I know I do make that mistake, but I don't want to be complicit with any of its misdeeds. And I wouldn't want that to be representative of America as a whole to the rest of the world. What she said about, not caring about our own communities compared to Israel really rings true. And we saw this, just one example. There were those hurricanes that came through North Carolina a while back and caused immense devastation. Was it flooding or hurricanes? And they were looking for aid at that point. And, there were memes going around the internet, and they just struck kind of hilarious, but also true in how they manifested, because they were maps of the U.S. where it had state names. And then when it came to North Korea, it was Israel. And that was the only way for them to accumulate aid from the federal government. But that's the place we're left with. There's no North Carolina lobby in federal Congress begging legislators of all stripes in all states to vote for what they want. But there is that for Israel. And that's a major problem.
Yeah.
And it's really simple.
One of my children just graduated college, and I was talking to her this morning over coffee. She's got 13 friends she's moving to a major American city with. And I know them all. I know them, for her 4 years in college. Great people. 3 have jobs.
3.
Yeah,
out of
3
13.
out of 13. And it's not, it's like a real college.
Yeah.
Pretty good college and pretty smart kids. Hard to get into for sure. 3 out of 13. And most of them are from, well-to-do family. They'll be fine. They're not going to starve to death or anything, but that's not good.
No, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We are literally failing our children.
Yeah.
And it's unacceptable. And it's opening the door for so many bad things in America. It's opening the door for Americans turning to voices and turning to leaders that they should never pay attention to.
Exactly.
And it disgusts me. Honestly, I turned a corner this past weekend where I'd had it. I have been in 4 years. My first 4 years was under the Biden administration. And so everything I blamed on Democrats.
Exactly.
And I was absolutely repulsed and disgusted to what happened to our country over 4 years. Just like everyone else. Shocked, angry, and disgusted.
Me too.
And obviously that's why we won in November.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, it was a miracle. I mean, people poured out from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and came out and voted for Trump, voted for Republicans in the House, Republicans in the Senate. So we've been in power for 6 months. And I was so excited in the beginning, thinking there's nothing we can't do. Literally nothing we can't do. But 6 months in, there's literally nothing that we can do. And then we ended up bombing a foreign country.
Oh my gosh, it is so refreshing to hear her say this. This is very white pilling to me, a source of hope amongst a vast desert of tyranny and expenditures and corporate welfare and wars across the world for the benefit of Israel and the Israeli lobby and the military-industrial complex, because very few Republicans are willing to say this. And she's a pretty big supporter of Donald Trump. You know, she touts him all the time. She did during the campaign season. I think he was a huge supporter of her, helping her get elected, but she's extremely popular in a district that respects her. And look, I don't agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene on everything, and probably including a lot of the domestic policies that she wants. But at the same time, for her to talk about this in this way, it really is courageous in comparison to a lot of her compatriots and her peers in Congress. So cheers to you, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm pretty impressed so far.
And that upset me so much. And I'm allowed to be upset about it. I can stand here and say...
You are allowed?
Well, no, I'm not sure if... not according to Mark Levin and not according to many others, you know, that prioritize another country over our country.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, it was the coolest thing this past week when I took a really hard stance and I said, I'm totally against this. This is literally what we campaigned on not doing. And here we're doing the thing we said we wouldn't do. Like, why are we doing the thing we said we wouldn't do?
Oh, shut up, Marjorie. Just go along with it.
That's what I was told.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet you were.
Literally, shut up, Marjorie. I get that a lot. But no, this was so crazy to me. We're doing the thing that we said we wouldn't do. And when I spoke out against it, it was like just what you described. Two sides raging on the issue.
Yes.
The one side that was like, yes, we will defend Israel. We will defend them no matter what, against anyone. We'll send our children to die for them. We'll take all the nuclear bombs upon ourselves.
I'm not dying for Israel.
Before we let anything happen to Israel. So we have that whole side. And war.
What is that?
I don't know.
But she's so right about the Republicans doing exactly what they campaigned against. You know, one of Trump's grand pitches during his campaign was that he wouldn't launch a new war. And, you know, one of the selling points that a lot of his supporters said was, well, he didn't start a war in his first term. Well, that was half true. It's true that he didn't start a new theater of war in his first term. He did exacerbate wars in Yemen and Syria and ramped up the bombing in Afghanistan for a time before he started to lay plans to withdraw U.S. forces there. Ultimately, Biden did that, you know, disastrously, but at least the U.S. got out of Afghanistan finally. But at the same time, he wasn't a non-interventionist. He was willing to escalate war theaters, but they were right. He didn't start a new war. Well, he did in this case. He joined Israel's war, involved the U.S., and it's a setback. You know, they're acting like this was a stunning success, but it looks like Iran got the uranium out of at least Fordo, the Fordo complex, one of the three that were bombed. And if I'm Iran now, I want nothing more than to fast-track a nuclear weapon because of how I was treated. The negotiations were tanked by the U.S. delegation, you know, to collaborate with Netanyahu on this perilous strategy. And this is where we are. They were condemning Biden for doing targeted bombing on Iran, I think less than a year ago, for the same thing that Trump then did. And you're not supposed to talk about it. Trust the plan. It's 4D chess. Well, I'm sick of it. And I'm so glad to hear her acknowledge it too.
I don't know. And then we had the whole other side, which was all these people that came out of the woodwork from all over the place. Democrats, liberals, progressives, Republicans, MAGA, America First, flooding in, and it was an all range of things. As you know, the MAGA and America First people was like, I agree with MTG, she's right. And then you've got the people on the left are going, oh my God, what is happening to me? This is the end of the world. I'm agreeing with MTG. Like they're doing mental gymnastics because they're agreeing with me.
And that is very convenient for the opposing party, the minority party. Like I just talked about, Republicans did this under Biden, so it is convenient. I have no doubt that some of it's genuine, like maybe, you know, the AOCs of the world and the Ilhan Omars of the world and the Rashida Tlaibs of the world. You know, it is a genuine principle that they have not to get embroiled in Israel's wars. And that's good. I commend them for them, despite, again, having a lot of problems with probably what they want to do domestically, not even probably. But to see these alliances form, I'll always support the anti-war alliance at the time, regardless of party composition, because that's how dissidents have to operate. Single-issue coalitions that stop wars and stop this madness from happening. So it's actually refreshing to hear that, even though, yeah, I don't think a lot of the establishment opposition to this is principle-based. I think it's tribal based and partisan based in many regards.
And it was hilarious, but they're flooding my office with phone calls agreeing with me. And I'm sitting here going, hey, Republicans, remember we said we weren't going to do this? Imagine how much support we could have if we stuck with it. Like if we actually stuck with what we said and actually meant it, because now there's a lot of people that feel betrayed that we didn't stick with that.
I know.
And that's not what President Trump wants. Absolutely, that's not what he wants. You know, and I have to give him all the praise and credit. He bombed them and then he pulled out. Mm-hmm. Thank God. And I loved it when he dropped the F-bomb talking to.
Okay, before she gets into that, all right, so I don't give Trump as much credit as she does, and I get why she's doing it. It was better than the worst case scenario. Don't get me wrong. This could have gone way worse. Way worse. Regime change, I think, was on the table. But what Trump did in deciding to bomb Iran and those sites really imperiled a lot of U.S. troops in that region. Not domestically. They couldn't strike Americans domestically. The idea that they could and all this ideas about mushroom clouds over New York, that was all propaganda. But he rolled the dice with a lot of American lives in that region. He had to rely upon the Iranian regime's response to take this off-ramp. If they wouldn't have practiced restraint and tipped him off to the missiles they fired in return, which had no chance of actually killing Americans, they just did that to save face domestically and show that they were willing to counterattack. If they didn't do that and a few hundred soldiers died, I think you'd be hearing Trump not only selling war, I think you'd be launching a regime change war at this point. Boots would be on the ground, and we might be in a situation that is as worse or worse than Afghanistan and Iraq, where they actually put boots on the ground to invade the country, displace its government, overthrow it, and then a 20-year occupation followed. So yes, a better off-ramp was taken, but no, I give the Iranians more credit than Trump. This was a risky gamble that thankfully ended up better than it could have been, but we're still in a worse situation because who's going to negotiate with the U.S. now? And this shows that the U.S. was willing to tank their own negotiations, to collaborate with a war criminal, Netanyahu, who's committing a genocide, to launch a new war. This is absurd. I don't think posterity will look back at the people that supported this favorably whatsoever.
The press, and he was like, both of them have gone crazy. I was like, inject this in my veins right now. This is exactly what I want to hear. But it was the two major reactions that blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind.
I'm not.
Yeah, so she's referring to the time in which he was asked about what he thought about both Israel and Iran breaking the ceasefire. So for a few hours after the ceasefire ended, apparently both sides broke that to some extent. It seems to have quelled and stopped to some extent. But he said, I'm sick of it. I told them not to drop the bombs and they dropped the bombs, talking about Israel. But really, if he was actually upset about Israel, he would just have to withdraw support and funding and, even threaten to withdraw aid. He's not going to do that. He's too closely tied at the hip of Netanyahu and the Adelsons and the Israel lobby. They helped fund his campaign. He got over $200 million from AIPAC link groups and Israel lobbyists. And he got $100 million from Miriam Adelson herself. He stacked his cabinet with Zionists that are very hardcore pro-Israel, and including even Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., by the way, who are considered dissidents in other regards. But this was not the gesture that will play out in policy. I'm glad to hear that rhetoric as she is, but I don't think that's going to tangibly affect the U.S.-Israeli relationship.
Entirely surprised. I've seen that. It is a kind of weird feeling to be praised by people you disagree with on everything or think you disagree with them. Like, who knows? I don't know. Everything is kind of up for grabs. I'm against killing people.
Yeah.
Innocence. I'm just opposed. I'm totally opposed to abortion.
Yeah, and by the way, he's going to be called a conspiracy theorist or a woke right for saying he's against killing people, by the way. When it pertains to Israel, if you say that, you're woke right, according to many circles. And he brings up a point here. He's pro-life, too. So if you're a politician agitating on behalf of Israel for what it's doing in Gaza and Iran, you can talk as much as you want about how great it is what they're doing in those two theaters, and then the next day you can go speak at a pro-life rally. That's what you can do as a Republican senator or congressman. And they don't see the contradiction whatsoever. That, it's not exactly pro-life to support what's going down in Rafah right now or in Tehran. That's the truth.
I think euthanasia is one of the worst most evil things I can think
Me
of.
too. I agree.
And I think wars of choice are really evil. That's my view.
Yep.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, and I feel that instinctively, but I also feel like theologically that's correct. I guess, like, what do I know? But I feel it. But you represent a district in Georgia that's very heavily Protestant Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Protestant Christian, like you are too.
Yep.
And there is a feeling among a lot of Protestant Christians, non-mainline, what we call evangelicals, I guess is the term they use, that we have a moral obligation to support the secular government of Israel. Mm-hmm. That God tells us that we have to fight these wars for the secular government of Israel, not for the ancient nation of Israel or the Jewish people, but for the secular government.
This is true, and I hate to say it. I'm also a non-Catholic Christian. I don't like to categorize myself as a Protestant, even though I do protest the papacy, but I don't think that's the best way of describing my beliefs. I believe in Christianity like he does, and dispensationalism and these ideas that modern Christians have to support the modern state of Israel that was created, 2,000 years after the Gospels were written is just a load of bunk. That idea didn't even become prominent until at least the 19th century and more so the early 20th century, where that has been, the propaganda that a lot of evangelicals point to in pursuit of this. So, yeah.
That supports abortion and supports LGBTQ and trans and.
So, two questions. One, what kind of reaction have you gotten from those voters, many of whom are like some of the best people I know? I just want to say that.
Oh, they're great.
They're great, and they're all your fans. But what kind of reaction have you gotten from them? And second, where does that come from, that belief?
Mm-hmm. I'm sure some of them are mad at me right now. I can totally expect that and understand it, and I'm sure we'll work it out. That's something I do know. I don't know where it comes from. I think, to me, what I've witnessed, just from my opinion, it is embedded in our education system. We're taught all these things. We're, of course, taught about the Holocaust, taught about the nation of Israel. It's embedded in our education, but it's also embedded in church. It's embedded in church, and they take that verse back in, I guess it's Genesis
12.
Genesis 12, bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you.
Yeah, I checked the other day because I had this interesting conversation with Ted Cruz, who said his theology was based on that verse. He had no idea where in the Bible it was and couldn't describe.
And he also pretended that refers to the future nation state of Israel, which was created by globalists at the UN, by the way, in 1948. And that's what Christians are now obligated to follow, even though he's reading from old law, the Old Testament. And if you're a Christian, you believe that Jesus fulfilled the law. But he was still pretending that modern Christians have to support that based on that verse. And that was his guiding principle about why he has to support Israel. It really is a load of bunk. Even in, many mainstream denominations and sects of Christianity don't even teach that. And a lot of Christians would support Israel and also still point that out, that doesn't obligate you to support this modern globalist created centrally planned state that was created by way of a UN land distribution project. It's crazy.
What it meant. But that's his theology. Mm-hmm. Try not to be disrespectful, though I have no respect for it, I just want to say. But anyway, I looked at in my Bible, I checked two different translations. There's no word Israel in there. I don't know enough to know what he's really talking about, but.
Right.
Well, because Israel in the Old Testament didn't necessarily refer to a nation state. Nation states didn't even exist at that point for the most part. There were empires and such, but the modern nation state is a modern conception. And if you talk about people, that was kind of synonymous with Israel. Israel referred to the group of followers of God, the Abrahamic God. So this wasn't pointing to this modern nation state that's committing genocide in Gaza that we had to support. It's so ridiculous to even argue this.
But that's very common for kids in Sunday school to be taught.
It's used in Sunday school, and it's used in Bible studies, and it's related to the end times. I've done those Bible study groups. It is very much tied into Revelations, and they walk all the way through. They tie it in with the covenant. They tie it in all the way. And look, I'm not going to pretend I'm a Bible scholar. I'm not going to pretend that I know everything. As a matter of fact, I'll sit way back in the back. I know who I am. I know I'm a sinner, and I'm not going to try to tell anybody what they should believe. But I've read my Bible. I grew up Catholic, and then I didn't like the pedophile priest issue, didn't want to raise my children in that. So I left the church, and I'm just a Christian, just a simple Christian. And I've read my Bible. And the one thing I know is it says a lot of other things in there. It says, do not murder. That's pretty important.
Sure does.
Yeah.
We'll just forget about that one for the purposes of selling all these U.S. empire building wars, the proxy wars, the war against Iran, bankrolling the genocide in Gaza. We'll just throw that one by the wayside, though. You don't hear that one popularized by the war party, that's for sure.
Someone hits you in the face, turn the other cheek. If someone takes your cloak, give them the rest of your clothes. I mean, It's like, look, that's from Jesus. So Christians care above all what Jesus says, I think.
I do.
How have we gotten to the point where you have sincere Christians who I think I probably agree with on everything, on certainly most things, who people I love would be delighted to have dinner with? I mean, no disrespect at all to them. But how do we get to a point where good people like that are making the case that Jesus wants more bombing? What is that?
Well, also look at Jesus himself, he was persecuted in his lifetime by the leaders of Israel, the leaders at the temple. He was persecuted by his own people's leaders.
That's true. The Pharisees thought him an apostate, though officially, the Romans executed him. It was by agitation of the Pharisees, clearly, if you read the Old Testament. But Jesus was the Prince of Peace. He wasn't the Lord of War. And at one point he did say, I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. And what he was talking about there, and if you look at that verse in the Gospels, he's talking about how, a lot of people will suffer because they choose to become Christians and follow him. It will turn, parents against children, families split apart, neighbor versus neighbor, if you choose to follow him. And that was the case, especially in that time when the Roman Empire not only didn't tolerate Christianity, it executed a lot of the purveyors and evangelists of Christianity. So, this is all warped in some ways to propagandize for war, but there's nothing in the Bible that forces believers to support the modern Israeli state.
And that's something to recognize. And all of the prophets throughout the Old Testament, who were they persecuted and killed by? The leaders of their day. It's throughout the entire Bible. So it's not uncommon that this would be happening. And here's what I find interesting. I don't think, America, if you've read Revelations, is not in Revelations.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to talk about that. And we need to say, why is America not in Revelations? And I think we could come up with all kinds of theories, but I know for a fact it's not in there because I've read that part too.
Yeah, I don't think John was aware in his cave on Patmos of the United States of America.
Well, and when he was given,
I mean, God said, my kingdom is not of this world. What more does he have to say about this? Modern nation states are not part of Christ's kingdom whatsoever.
Given that entire vision and shown all of that, he wasn't shown America. So there's a clear reason, and we don't know why. But I think back to this story, is Americans have been taught that they have to do whatever Israel says. And it's the secular government of Israel. The secular government should not be telling Christians in America what they should and shouldn't do with their tax dollars, with their military, and with who their allegiance should go to.
Boy, I got a lecture on Christian theology the other day from David Friedman, the former Trump ambassador to Israel. And I was like, not against David Friedman, seems smart, but like, seemed a little much to be giving me a lecture about Christian theology. I mean,
Well,
Well, what's too ironic is that some of the early Zionists, including like the main architect of Zionism, one of them certainly, Theodor Herzl, was a secularist too. So a lot of this isn't even wrapped up in religious precepts for the purpose of a modern Israeli state. A lot of it was created outside of the construct that so many people frame it as to get, a lot of Christians to support this stuff.
and also here's something else we have to recognize with people that are like mad at me or mad at you about saying these things. We need to they need to think about this too. Is like, hey, we all live in this house. It's called the United States of America. This is our house. And if we are giving our full allegiance to another foreign country who doesn't pay our taxes, will not pay off our debt, did not come and defend our southern border when it was invaded for 4 years straight, when its prime minister, Netanyahu, was the first to congratulate Joe Biden being president of the United States. He was the first foreign leader. I don't understand.
A country that has longstanding military ties to China.
Yeah, there's that.
Which runs the port of Haifa. I mean, I'm not attacking. Look, Israel's doing what it thinks it needs to do. I just want to say for the 50th time, I'm not especially mad at Israel.
Not mad at Israel.
I'm mad at our leaders who don't seem to care about the United States.
Yeah, I think this gives a little bit of pass to the leadership of Israel, which is kind of an extension of the U.S. empire, certainly in the Middle East. I'm on board with caring more about the complicity of my own criminal government in their pursuits, but it's not like I can disconnect the two when it's just an extension of our government, where Israel seems to be a more cherished state than North Carolina for reasons I pointed out earlier. I can't give Israel's government quite as much of a pass. Certainly the people within Israel that are wrapped up in this thing and have nothing to do with it or oppose it. So, certainly not those people, but I'd go further than, Tucker is here.
I think that's it.
And that's the problem. And that's where we are. We have this house. It's our house, the United States of America. And our elected leaders are not fully focused on our house and our problem with our children and their future. And that's why we are opening the door wide open to foreigners that have moved to the United States of America and profess insane socialist and communist views, and they are going to get elected. There's another one running against Nancy Pelosi, AOC's former campaign manager and chief of staff. And he sounds just like that mayor in New York. And he is a Democrat primarying Nancy Pelosi.
Okay, so a lot of my libertarian friends are going to be like, what the hell are you saying right now, Dave? But I'm sorry to say, and Marjorie Taylor Greene may be surprised to hear this, that many socialists and communists probably agree with her much more on foreign policy than her peers in Congress. In fact, I know many of them do. A lot of them are duped by modern liberalism and wokeism, and Jimmy Dore's talked about that to a great extent. But a lot of the people she's warning about right now actually would have the same foreign policy prognosis that she does when it comes to Israel and Iran. So just want to make that clear. I know some people are going to think I'm crazy. Hey, I'm not a fan of socialist economic theory and Marxism whatsoever, but that is the case. I know a lot of really good people on the left that are really good on foreign policy. Just want to make that clear.
So this whole thing the left is going to go in a whole nother direction because Republicans who professed America first are not solving the problems for our house.
Right. And Republicans refuse to talk about economics, like actual economics, not bullshit economics, GDP and tax cuts, but actually like, it's too expensive for my kids to buy a house. What are you doing about that?
Right.
And the answer is absolutely nothing. Other than yelling, you're a socialist. I'm not insecure about being a socialist. I don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. That's just basically a way to throw red meat out to your own audience on the right and have them all support it without actually diagnosing and providing a solution to it. That is true.
What people call me, but that is a much bigger problem than anything Iran is cooking up in its centrifuges, as far as I'm concerned. Certainly a bigger problem for everyone I know. My kids can't buy a house. Therefore, they can't get married and have kids.
Right.
Certainly so. The biggest problems of America are internal. They're not in these external countries. Your liberty is here. It's individual. It's to your person. You have self-ownership, and you have the right to the fruits of your labor. And you can't have that right and preserve your wealth in these endless wars. And I'm so glad to hear Marjorie Taylor Greene speak out against them, very courageously so. I can guarantee you for this interview, she's going to get a lot of flack from the Republican leadership that's going to expect her to vote for more aid for Israel. You know, Mike Johnson will expect her maybe even for more aid to Ukraine. We haven't seen that fight play out in Congress, but hey, it looks like a lot of the policies Trump promised when it came to Ukraine aren't exactly coming to fruition either. So there's a lot of things that this brought up that is extremely interesting. Marjorie Taylor Greene joins her colleague Thomas Massey on being particularly courageous on this issue. And one of the things Theo Vaughn asked Massey was, well, what do Americans get out of it? What are we missing? What are so many average Americans not seeing in this whole picture? And no one can tell you. No one can tell you any benefit that Israel gives to the United States outside of, well, you get dragged into all their wars. You get dragged into the worst PR disaster and bloodbath in that region in a long time in the genocide in Gaza. You get, to plunge your own state into debt for the sake of a foreign government. That's what you get. And I'm so glad to hear her point these things out. Very little that I disagreed with in this overall between those two, except for some of those issues in the framing, as you guys heard. But man, I got to commend Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is fantastic, and she really is a courageous individual for this. This might be enough to get my vote if I lived in her region, and that it's hard to get my vote, and I don't even always vote. So, props to you, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Props to you, Tucker, for having her on. And please let me know in the comments below. Did you agree with me? Any arguments you think I missed? Anything that you want to add to this in regard to Israel's influence and the Israel first mentality? And do you like Marjorie Taylor Greene more after hearing this? Let me know down below. Subscribe to Tucker's channel. He's awesome. He has excellent guests, especially lately. And please like my video, subscribe to my channel, consider becoming a YouTube member or Patreon patron. And I'd really appreciate your support if you do that. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.